In the latter half of 2010, Magnus Carlsen was already higher rated than Viswanathan Anand, and in their personal encounters, Carlsen seemed to be getting the edge. They met in the Grand Slam final in Bilbao in October 2010, and these, of course, were classical games. Their first encounter with serious time controls for some time. Let's see what happened. In this game, Carlsen has the white pieces. We join the game after 30 moves, and Anand has quite a comfortable position. It's an endgame, and you can see that Anand has majority of pawns on the queen side, and this d-pawn is solidly blockaded by black's pieces. If Anand can create a distant passed pawn, then, well, the game could be turning in black's favour. I think the other thing that counts against white here is that his king is a long way from the centre of the board. So, yeah, all in all, after Anand played b6, things are looking, well, very comfortable for black, let's just say that. I think, of course, Carlsen can now exchange on b6, and we have this situation with the distant passed pawn. I think this is playable for white. You know, white's knight on c5 is very active. Bishop on b3 also looking good. White, well, black is probably slightly better, but I'm sure white can hold that position. But I think it's very typical of Carlsen that here he saw a way to seize the initiative, and he tried knight e3. He could feel that the game might be turning against him, so he seizes back the initiative with knight e3. Very interesting move. Now, black can't hold that knight on d5. If, for example, bishop c6, then white trades everything on d5 and then takes on b6. White's better. So black has to exchange off the knight on e3. Now, clearly, if white just recaptures here, then black is doing very well. But, of course, this wasn't Carlsen's idea. He throws in pawn takes pawn. It's a remarkable idea. So after this, white is a piece down, but Carlsen has given himself this very dangerous passed pawn on b6. And here he played knight c5, which also looks very dangerous indeed. In fact, it might have been a mistake. It's probably better to play d5 in this position. And, well, Anand is probably okay here. I mean, it's an interesting position. Let me just go a little bit further. After g4, you drive the knight away and play knight d6. And, well, here there's a very funny idea. It looks like black is in huge trouble. The threat is knight takes bishop and then pushing on. You can see that pawn on d5 is very useful, covering the c6 square, preventing a knight coming to c6. Sorry, there's a lot of colour on the board. And here, but there's a very nice move for black, and that's bishop b7, with the idea that if this is taken, then now the knight can come back to take this pawn. It's very strange indeed. And here, well, chances I'd say are roughly level. White's pieces are very active and very strong, but black blocks out the king, and you never know, this passed pawn could still prove its worth. I think it's a double-edged position. That's probably the best way for white to play. Instead, Carlsen played knight c5. Now, he must have overlooked something. It's hard to say what, but let's see what happened. Knight takes pawn. Well, it's good to get rid of that one. Now, if knight takes bishop, then white can actually queen the pawn, but it gets taken, and they end up in an endgame where black has this distant passed pawn. Black should have a winning advantage there. So Carlsen pushed on, threat to queen. Anand blocks this, so prevents the pawn queening. And again, knight takes bishop would transpose into the line we just looked at. So then the bishop has to be saved. Now, perhaps it's here that Carlsen overlooked something. Who knows? Maybe he was short of time. If the bishop moves this way, then knight takes pawn, and probably white's going to be okay here. get the piece back at any rate. But bishop e8 is a very good move from Anand. Maybe Carlsen overlooked this. Now, if the pawn queens, then black is just this pawn up again and should have very good winning chances. So knight takes pawn, and the king drifts over. Now, we can see a very clever point of Anand's play. If bishop takes knight, let's say, so white will win the piece back, but now watch what happens. This very typical move in bishop versus knight endgames. The bishop controls all the knight squares, and then black's king is free to wander across the board and will take the knight. Knight is trapped. So Carlsen has nothing better than to just bring his king into the game. He can't improve his position on the queen side. And Anand can just steadily bring his king over. And a little maneuver with the knight. This is good. Again, if pawn queens, then black just ends up a piece up in that position. So Carlsen took. Of course, there was a threat just from the knight, just to take the pawn. And once again, if the pawn queens, then we have this situation where the knight is trapped and black is going to win this one. So Carlsen can't do very much here. He tried to squeeze a bit on the king side, maybe hoping to exchange off all the pawns, and black has to handle this very carefully, but Anand's technique was perfect actually. And let's just see how the game concluded. So first of all, these pawns are blocked on the king side, and here Carlsen actually resigned. Okay, why? Let's have a look why. He didn't wait to be shown. First of all, the king is blocked out, so Carlsen can't do anything with his king here. He just has to wait. And now here's the very clever winning idea for black. You can't come closer with the king. These squares are covered. But there's a neat idea. Knight b8. Beautiful, actually. So the knight gets taken, and we take the pawn. Even material, but the knight is still trapped. Now, white's only chance is to try to liquidate all the pawns on the king side. Let's see what happens. Well, first of all, let's take this. And now, if king f6, well, we need to cover that pawn. Actually, you don't need to cover that pawn. That's interesting. You can play bishop e4 as well. But let's see what happens. After f5, bishop e4 is a winning move. If that's taken, then we take on f5. And if f takes g6, well, actually, you can recapture with either pawn or bishop. Doesn't matter which one. And then the king will come across, and slowly the king is forced away, and we take this one. And going back to this position, if f5, then you could play, for example, bishop here, and that's a winning move. Again, it forces a decision with this pawn, and the bishop will just move to f5 and cover everything. Very, very impressive technique from Anand, and Carlsen somehow miscalculated there in the complications. So Anand was back, and it was a better end to 2010 for Anand in his encounters against Carlsen, as we're going to see in the next clip.